this session together. We called it vertical integration. And then part of the way of organizing this, speaking with the speakers here, it kind of came to our attention that we weren't really thinking about the full picture, because vertical integration is just one dimension. So there's also this concept of this horizontal integration. And then during lunchtime, having yet an even deeper discussion with some other folks, it almost came to my mind that really it's not even vertical or horizontal, just those two, but it's actually different dimensions of integration as well. Having done some application development, both internally at a firm and kind of at an industry-wide level, integration is kind of the hard part of developing applications. So it kind of scales in a lot of different ways. So with that being said, we have four amazing individuals here. Christopher Diggins, he's head of research from Vim Aec. Matthew Comber, vice president, architecture and engineering at Project Frog. Chris Sharples, co-founder of Assemble OSM, and Clifton Harness, CEO and co-founder of TestFit. So with that being said, the first question I want to pose out there is, what is this concept of vertical integration, horizontal integration? How do each of you define it, and how do each of you kind of find yourselves in this world of integration?
I guess I can kick that one off. And I like the way that you pose the question, how do each of us define it? Because I guarantee you the answer is going to be different for each of us up here and everyone else in this room. At Project Frog, those who don't know us, we're a prefabricated structural core and shell kit components engineering and delivery company. I would call us multi-directionally integrated. We do simplify it to vertical and horizontal pretty often, but I like that sentiment. So, Frog, we started as architects, eventually incorporated engineering to design prefabricated, mostly wall panelized systems. And we partner, actually, this is where our horizontal comes in. We partner with a national network of decentralized manufacturers to manufacture our kits. And then we are working on a similar partnership network with installers. So, we're going up and down the delivery chain from project conception and design to occupancy, and then spreading out horizontally in different areas along the way, as it makes the most strategic sense for us. So that's our definition and how we approach the vertical and horizontal aspects of integration in the physical building delivery process.
So when I had to study up on what vertical integration meant, at first I thought, well, what role does software have to play? And I realized, well, software is actually part of the supply chain for the design process. So as architects, you're consuming software. And it's very exciting to see that many of you are actually writing your own software. And one of the questions that's been kind of skirted around, and I believe one of the folks in the audience is asking it directly, is should we be selling the software or should we just be giving it away? And so there's kind of this open question is, could architects move into the software industry? And from what I'm seeing today, most definitely, yes, they could. But another question was brought up, another point was brought up about collaboration. And collaboration doesn't just mean two people are getting together for free. It means that there could be a mutually beneficial partnership. I think that there could be more consulting with professionals in the software industry and to say, well, let's work together. Let's figure out how we could productize what we're doing. Because, as someone who spent close to 40 years coding software, I don't know anything about your workflows, only at the most superficial level. But I guarantee you don't know as much about software and computers as I do. So working together, I think we could perhaps come up with something that would benefit the industry as a whole and would help you to be profitable. Because Michael brought up a point. He's like, well, it's risky for us. We have thin profit margins. And if there's an opportunity to use something off the shelf, we will, because that might be too expensive. But I challenge you, do you know for sure that something's too expensive? consult with people, work in partnership and try to figure out, because I think there's a lot of opportunities here for architects to move into software and potentially software-based services as well. So that's my spiel on how I see vertical integration working for you folks.
Yeah, I sort of come at it from, 25 years ago when we founded Shop Architects. And there were two things I remember seeing. One was a show at the National Gallery of Renaissance Models. And you will, if you're familiar with Renaissance models, I like the dome of St. Peter, it's 25 feet in diameter. You walk inside and you know the stories of Brunelleschi having a model of the Duomo. And people didn't really look at drawings. They really looked at, these physical models, including the client. There's actually a great quote from Alberti says, if you really want to, I'm paraphrasing him, really want to understand, the whole scope of the project, models are the best way. He also said it's a good start in terms of costing out the project. And then, in 1995, there was a show on PBS on, 4-part miniseries on the whole development of the 777 by Boeing, all based on model-based delivery. And, sort of watching this, you saw the model as sort of the vertical element in terms of how it draws everybody together, from not only the design and engineering team, but to the fab team, to the customer, to the mechanics in the field. And that was a very powerful thing, for, me in a very disaggregated, siloed industry. So fast forward to 4 years ago when my brother and I founded Assembly OSM, which is a volumetric modular company that, develops, mid to high rise modular buildings. And we learned a lot from what not to do on our Dean Street project in Brooklyn next to the Barclays Arena. And so for us, it is sort of multiple sort of dimensions where the model is the platform and it's the single source of product data. Everything is captured in there, and it's an iterative model. It's organic. It's not fixed. Some of the things that Martha was talking about really rung true with some of the things that we're thinking about. But the key is you want to be able to open that to as many people as possible, not only the design team and the engineering team, but the open source supply chain. And that is sort of the horizontal relationship, whether it's in real estate, in design, in manufacturing, in post-occupancy, is understanding how that model can be consumed and understood by or acted on by many different people. So it is sort of these two worlds coming together and sort of growing this sort of volume of interaction. So that's sort of how I see it.
As a startup, you're looking for a niche to enter a market and then to grow from that niche. And when you can start with a niche like housing, it's a very much horizontal effort. So being the co-founder of TestFit for the last 5 years, growing this company, we started in multifamily, just automating basic architectural concept design. And I don't think that anyone is ready for vertical integration excellence until they have horizontal excellence. And you can build valuable things off of something that already exists. You can't just go up and say, hey, we're going to vertically integrate this whole process. And the reason why you can't just say and do it is because you don't understand what you don't understand. So you have to have excellence at one point, and then that enables you to then grow into other parts of the value chain. So for us at TestFit, where we're getting into vertical integration now is we've got the multifamily excellence, we've got industrial design excellence. Those are our two typologies in the design space. And we raised a significant amount of money to then invest into the verticalized play, which is there's pro formas and then there's pricing. Those are the two other documents that need to be done for any plan that we generate to be successful. So for us, it's more about verticalizing the different stakeholders into one software solution so that they can collaborate and get to a better answer faster.
Okay, so that was sort of the, how do you define it? But now the next question I want to ask is why? Why are you folks are looking at it? Is this something that this concept of integration, whether it's vertical or horizontal or maybe some other dimensional, why should we be looking at it? Why is it something that is pertinent to you that you've taken that step to make that change? And why should we, maybe follow in those footsteps?
Should I lead off again?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to tie that question back to kind of a theme that I've heard throughout the day here around the benefits that everyone in this room is striving for around collaboration. That comes in many forms. It can be achieved in many ways, but ultimately, the running theme I've heard in this room today is we all want to be working together, be it passing data back and forth, be it, standing up partnerships, whatever that means. We want to be communicating better, working better together to get out of all of our individual design silos that our industry has been built around for eons, in order to ultimately deliver a better product for humanity. Okay. For us, by verticalizing, that means that we are bringing all of these traditionally siloed aspects of the building delivery process into one ecosystem, not necessarily one roof, one ecosystem where we are all working deeply, deeply together in order to start capturing a lot of the benefits, again, that we've been talking about all day. By doing that, not only does it allow us to leverage drastically different areas of expertise all across the delivery process, but it also allows us to start automating that delivery in ways that we haven't seen done before. So we build a lot of our own automation tools to get through the process that go all the way from, I've got my engineering team, we've got a building on X site, look at the geotech report, run the hazard analysis, and that data lives true all the way through to the installation of that building, right? So that data gets passed through the structural engineering process into the production models, into the fabrication facilities, and ultimately onto the job site for installation. So by verticalizing, we've been able to capture a lot of these benefits, and we've done so in a very, very niche market where we've seen a lot of need. And I'm excited to see, a lot of the concepts we're all talking about here start to expand into some adjacent markets.
Yeah, I would expand on what you were saying. I haven't been here all day, so I haven't heard, but it's great to hear that collaboration has been one of the words that's been spoken about throughout the day. It's like, relationship building is all about building trust. The other thing, I think I heard this last night at TT, was the word empathy. If you read, Adam Smith's first book on theory of moral sentiment, it's all about being in the marketplace and empathizing with your customers' wants and needs. And the thing is, we've got empathy through the whole chain, whether it's from the developer owner all the way through, the consultant team to the manufacturers to the people who end up taking care of the buildings. So it's really beginning to sort of open that up and start to understand what are those needs and defining what those are, and then ideation. It's really what the design thinking is all about. And I think it's definitely one of the things that we're challenged with, because our process is the wrong process. It's not about projects, it's not about products, it's really about process innovation. By changing process, we can affect behavior. And that's the biggest problem right now. We're all worried about our bottom line. And the margins, as I heard in the last panel, are very tight. And the fact is, we're providing a lot of value, and we're managing, in a way, risk. And so the thing is, really having these conversations either with ownership or with your fabricators or with everybody within the value chain, this is how we can start to sort of collaborate and move forward. Again, it's a very I mean, general abstract way of talking about it, but I do believe that changing the behavior through these processes of using these tools could have a big impact on how we can accelerate some of these changes.
So companies are only three things: people, products, and processes. I took a management class one time, and that's what the person said. It's relatively true, I think, if you do the kind of a thought exercise about it. Products and processes don't have empathy. Humans do. So in order to get to a place where at TestFit we could understand how to deploy Thornton Tomasetti's structural AI from an API call, which is fancy for saying they coordinated in the cloud without a human present. It took 90 days of just coordination calls with that team for us to have enough empathy to understand what the structural engineers really needed. Our goal was, hey, instead of having coordination calls 6 times a year, let's have an AI do it right now, all the time, continuously. And therefore we can reduce risk. And, I think that's maybe an example of a vertical integration, but it did take that empathy for the products to arrive at a place where people could actually trust it.
So my personal story about what kind of drives me towards wanting to increase vertical integration, in my context, which is I want to encourage more architects to take control of the software development process, is I feel it's kind of sad to hear that. I think it was Pablo who said, well, we're a small firm, we're going to have to wait and maybe we can knock more on the doors of the big software companies. But I look at the software, and I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've worked at these companies, and it's really frustrating that they are not really equipped to serve the needs of the users, of yourselves. They keep the data to themselves, and they're making oodles and oodles of money off of the data that you folks are creating. So there's an opportunity here, and I understand it's hard, and we look at some of the larger companies, we say, oh, well, they've got a big budget. But I think it was Nick who said, well, you know what? We assumed it would take 6 months. I said, I think we can do it in 3 weeks. And they did it. And that's been my approach to software development too. Everyone else would make an assumption. No, you can't do that. Only a company this size can do that. And I say, you know what? No, I disagree. We can increase software performance by 10x, and then we can be just a team of 3 people. And it's possible. You have to not be afraid to fail, as Martha says. It's just, follow the white rabbit. You are going to fail. You are going to fail again. But then you are going to have some amazing successes. And I find that so inspirational. And I wanted to, kind of encourage all of you to go out there and do it. But you will have to partner with people. Again, that's my message.
Piggybacking on that topic of the idea of failing, Chris and I, you and I were on a panel earlier this year in Chicago, and one of the questions that came up was failure, and that's kind of like shunned upon in many places. And I'm sure within this room, it's kind of okay, right? We won't be stabbed by it. But if you go back to leadership at the firm, like, what do you mean fail? No, we don't waste time. Every minute is billable. Every minute is accountable, right? How important is it that we actually discuss these failures and understand when it's okay to fail in order for us to actually be able to move forward?
I want to take this because I'm an expert in failure. It was interesting because I was involved in several hackathons at a previous employer, big company, starts with letter A. And it was really shocking how the best ideas of the hackathon weren't acted upon, because as soon as it got to leadership, they were like, all right, well, how are we going to guarantee success? I was like, it's impossible to innovate if you are managing risk. If you are, and this, I hate to say it, but I saw a lot of projects fail because they were too big to fail. They're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to spend $10 million and we're going to hire 100 people. And then the project's guaranteed to fail. It's the small projects that you leave them that room to risk. The one other thing I'll say is really fascinating. The way to inspire innovation is to reward the innovators with the opportunity to do more innovation. Something to think about. I think I've lost a bit the question, but I just wanted to say, fail.
Yeah, I cannot overstress the importance of failure and allowing failure in a measured manner and learning from failure. Success just does not come without failure. Challenge me on that. I'd love to chat over a beer, but I firmly believe that success does not come without failure. Failure should be encouraged, again, in a measured manner. To coin or borrow a key phrase from the software world, failure is good, just fail fast and learn from it, right? That's the key. Don't keep, if you're up against a failure, admit defeat and learn the lessons and move on, and iterate from there. Anyone in the room who's been following Project Frog for our 16-year history probably knows very well Frog is very good at failure. We've done it a lot, and we've learned a lot, and we've made a lot of pivots over the years in every aspect of the business, from what our product offering is, to what the delivery model is, to what the right market fit is, and how we approach that market. And through that history, we've been able to really hone in on a really successful model that we're proud of today.
So I think as a person that grew up in America, you kind of idolize people that are successful, and we have a whole lot of cultural issues with failure, especially I think in the architecture world, where people that grew up in Chris's generation, do red lines all day. What is a red line? Failure. Every red line you write or every red line you correct, it's just something that was failed and needs to be fixed. Failure, I think, is the default state of the universe. And I don't think most people are comfortable with that. The fact that humans exist on this planet is because failure didn't happen once, right? So bring it back to TestFit. In 2020, we shipped a hotel tool to a market that had 4% occupancy. That was a huge failure of leadership on my behalf to understand or not understand what the hell I was doing. And then 9 months later, we shipped an office tool to a market that wasn't building new office. And then finally we got wise and we looked at what was actually being built, and it was housing and it was industrial, the two markets that in the commodity space were strong and still are strong. So I think if you find the right investors or the right people you put yourself around you, you can not fail at the sort of 10,000 foot level, but you need to fail at the 5 foot level a lot to understand what is actually meaningful. And what I mean by that is I did over 2,000 sales calls myself in the first 3 years of this company, and I had an 8% close rate. That is a lot of failure, and that will train this biological neural net, like how to do what you ought to do, and you start to intuit better decisions. So if you are discouraged because you failed, I'm sorry, you need to fail a whole lot more so that you can get better.
I second that. For me, failure was a very early part of my life because my brother and I are dyslexic. I didn't really start to learn how to read until 4th grade. There was nothing more depressing than going from the 4th grade down to the 2nd grade for reading class in the morning. Anyway, what I realized after a period of time getting some special education help was that, I looked at things differently and I needed to create my own system. And then I went on to liberal arts and, got a degree in fine arts and history and a minor in political science. And then I went to Columbia for graduate school. And I remember the list of stuff I was supposed to buy for graduate school. You know, the electric eraser, the Mayline, all this stuff, the rotoring pens. And I set up my desk, and I started, and you know, if you come into some of you may have been in the office this week, and you see my desk, it's covered with things, documents, books, drawings, sketches. And the thing is, I couldn't keep even my desk clear. And my bar actually was the way I would clean my desk. My drawings were always filthy. And then I got an internship at Richard Meyer's office, where I had to draw on Mylar with a rotary pen, and nothing could be on my desk. So it wasn't working for me. Like, I could draw a straight line without a Mayline. And I saw that Mayline as a ball and chain. And then when we all graduated and we're all working, I'm like doing all these 2D drawings. And the thing that I really excelled at was building models. And my brother, and we've been building models since we were 6. And I'm like, basically the system was failing me. The process was failing me. It was holding me up in terms of how I could design, how I could visualize things. And so, yeah, it took a while. And I agree, you know, Larry Page said, you know, if you're going to fail, fail fast. And the point is, you do need to fail in order to innovate. So the key is, on every project, you should be trying to innovate something, not the whole goddamn project, just a little piece of the project. And you learn from that. The other thing that we did was we would have these little micro projects like the Carousel House or the Camera Obscura or Wave Cave. And they would be small enough that we could execute them in like a 3 or 4 month period. And it was the intelligence from those projects that would inform the bigger scale projects. But the key thing is do it quickly and recognize that things aren't working. Don't let it drag you down. And then, you know, the other thing is, when you're the leader of your company, you have to really inspire this kind of thinking. It can't come from the bottom up. It eventually will, if everybody on the floor understands that this is an important part of the spirit and growth of your practice.
So kind of, you know, continuing a little bit on that thread, we've seen a number of, you know, firms come into our industry and integrate, and they integrate at some, you know, exponential scale. You know, and we've had some, you know, charts that go off the slide and everything, and we've seen them belly flop, you know, as miserably as they may have done. How do we know, you know, because every time we integrate, right, we're theoretically stretching ourselves a little bit, right? We are still the one person or the one firm or so on and so forth, right? So at what point do we know that we've gone too far, or should we, or where is that point that we know we should stop to not stretch ourselves too thin, that we'll fail to a point where we can't come back?
Clifton made a comment a minute ago around, you need to fail a whole bunch of times at the 5-foot level, not at the 10,000 foot level, right? You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Manageable growth, manageable pieces, one step at a time. You know, never take on any more risk than you are able to handle. You know, it requires a lot of vigilance and a lot of self-awareness around your risk profile, risk tolerance, and a lot of education around how that will change at every step you take on your verticalization path.
Yes, exactly. You have to ask. One of the challenges with creative people and innovative people is they're often told they're wrong and they can't do it. So if you have one of these people and you're like trying to encourage them, they're used to people telling them that their ideas are bad. So when their idea really is bad and it's failing and people are telling them so, they don't listen. They just keep going. So that's true for probably everyone in this room. We're all creative individuals. So what happens is you have to ask people and you have to evaluate yourself very critically. And it's tough because you're going to be, am I onto something brilliant, or am I, you know, failing fast? So you have to use metrics and you have to be very open to what other people are saying, especially the customers. Be prepared to pivot quickly and evaluate frequently.
Yeah, and sort of follow up on that, it's like, you know, I don't like quote Warren Buffett a lot, but he did say, you know, don't overextend yourself. You know, 3 or 4 things on your plate is enough. And I think in our space, like, you know, visualization is definitely part of it. Generative design is another. You know, understanding, you know, how, you know, we interface with the supply chain through, you know, a model-based delivery process is definitely another one. And then, you know, how do we deal with the real estate marketplace? And so those are sort of like the 4 categories. What encapsulates that is just doing quality design and producing something that really means something to the built environment. That's sort of like a given because we're all architects, and that's part of our spiritual calling. But you know, in each one of those categories, you sort of focus on certain things that you feel are important for you to achieve success on the projects that you're doing at that moment. Because, you know, it's an iterative process. Again, to sort of, Martha was sort of alluding to this. It's not, the model is an organic, open architecture that should, you know, buildings should get better with time. They shouldn't sort of decay and fall apart. Well, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing with a lot of buildings. But you know, quality, you know, it's treating it like an aircraft is, you know, you constantly update the infrastructure. And that's sort of where this is all going for us. There are things that tie into this then is like, you know, ethical sourcing of materials in the supply chain, you know, worker welfare. You know, if you remember, there are certain very famous architects out there who said, this isn't our problem. You know, so this is all tied to the whole issue of means and methods. Again, there's these big umbrellas that really we have to get back into, but then you target within your sort of, in your office, what are the things that are going to allow me to access and have some kind of impact? And the thing is, there's going to be short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And ideally, you like to capture that all within a 5-year period, which is basically how long it takes to do a, you know, decent sized project.
That's one of my pet peeves is when I hear a designer lean on, oh, that's means and methods, let the contractor figure it out in the field. It's like, well, if you can't figure it out now, then you know you're setting up the contractor and therefore the project and therefore yourself for failure when things ultimately go wrong in the field. So yeah, that's a mindset that I highly discourage out of anyone in the industry. Understand how problems are solved when they are actually solved, be it in the field, in fabrication, whenever that is. We can't design for success until we understand how all of the challenges are solved end to end.
Are we still on the Katera question?
Was that obvious?
So
It's okay. He was off mic when he said it.
yeah. Buildings are the hardest things that humans endeavor to create. I mean, you might say like the space station or something, but those are like rocket scientists. Like normal people make buildings, right? And they're complicated and they're complex and they change people's cities, and people live in cities, and cities are things that they're attached to, an emotional attachment. So it doesn't shock me when, you know, $2 billion just disappears. When you attack the problem of buildings with money, it's not going to go well. So we talked about empathy the other night. I seriously think there is a huge lack of empathy from the architecture community to the engineering community. There's a lack of empathy from the engineering community to the architecture community, and also to the development community. Developers don't understand what an STC rating is, or what an R value means, or what a U value is on a window, but they know that it's important. If they actually knew, they would be like, yes, I care about that a lot. Like, please make sure that it's not toasty when I want it to be cool in this room. But it takes education and it takes empathy for anything in this future that we want to build together to happen. And I think historically architecture has just been kind of an industry without whole lot of hope. Because buildings are so complex and hard to make, the contracts that we sign, things made, do not enable innovation to be something that is first and forefront on people's minds. And it's also a per project industry. If you were to sit down and say, hey, I'm going to, in my career, or this was me, I sat down and I said, I want to do 20,000 units in my career as a developer. And that was in 2015. And I looked around and I saw, okay, there isn't a great process out there to achieve that. And even worse, the architects that I was managing would spend 2 weeks to draw a site plan that I was just going to throw away because I needed the numbers to be confirmed so I could tell a broker that we can't buy this site. So they didn't really understand why I needed what I needed from them. And that was frustrating too, because they're just wasting time. So, in TestFit, I see a lot of like automation, but I see a lot of hope too, because it's automation that is controlled by people. It's not a black box that you ask, oh, magical AI, tell me what this thing needs to be. It's actually a collaborative effort. And so I hope there's more tools like that, I think, from the technology side. But at the same time, I hope that the leaders in the AECO world start to really shift the contracts in a direction of progress.
I'd also like to add that any verticalization strategy is only going to be successful with the right market fit. And if that strategy is tailored to a market objective. We've seen the rise and fall of a lot of small and giant companies by trying to shoehorn a solution into a market that wasn't ready to receive it, or they struggle finding the right market. Chris and I are working in different markets, and Shop Architects has a very different verticalization strategy than Project Frog because of that, because we understand the markets that we're in. We are laser focused on those markets, which again, Frog failure many times on that front, I'll admit it. Okay. But through that failure, through those lessons, we've learned, nope, this is the market for our approach. And this is how we can tailor our verticalization strategy and our product approach to best fit the needs of this specific market. And that is where we are focused. We're going to learn this. We're going to figure it out. And then we're going to start taking baby steps into adjacent markets to apply slightly different variations of the strategy.
So, and I just want to, so what you're hearing right now is what we're talking about within our own space, but they're not talking about this in the academies. It's a really huge problem. I taught a studio in 2018 up at Yale and with Anna Dyson, and she created this fully immersive environment called Beam Lab. And I did all my desk crits in this space. I can't go back to regular desk crits anymore, because to have students surround you with their work on the wall, and each student would choreograph their projects the way they wanted to present it. When I started going back to teach, PowerPoint was the thing. So you would sit there and you would look at the project and you go slide by slide and you say, could you go back 3 slides? But when you're in this fully immersive space, your senses, except for necessarily smell, are pretty much being touched, and you are sensitive to so many different things. So this is where empathy really impacts you, especially when you're working on projects in other countries, and you see how people use things, how they make things, and so we need to take a lot of what I've been hearing in the last couple of hours and really bring it not only back to, the academy, but also to high school students and even grammar school students, because visualization and some of the things that we're talking about here really can accelerate this idea that, people can bring change. They can actually, have an impact and do things in a shorter period of time. But right now we're all sort of caught in this situation where we're just trying to affect the disaggregation that we have in our own industry. But we have to start getting that thought across to the people who are going to be coming into it, so they don't have to think they're going to be doing any red lines.
I want to take the opportunity to open up to the audience if there's any questions. No? Go for it. I think the microphone's in the seat in front of me.
I think, well, Matt and I met, I don't know, a long time ago at a steel conference. We were talking about body carbon, like 2012, that's how we connected. But maybe 4 years ago, we met out there and you were just starting like some automation software development. And so maybe can you walk us at least what you can tell, where you started and where you are now?
Oh boy, that's a big question. So Project Frog it has now become a separate business unit within the organization. So we have an enterprise software. It's a Revit plugin that enables designers to curate and manage repeated designs across multiple projects that are fabricatable, if that's the objective, but really that are just repeatable and properly curated. So that is a piece of software that Frog has built within the physical building solutions space. We have written, organically all sorts of different types of plugins that impact our own very specific workflows, again, around our specific market, around our specific verticalization strategy and our specific delivery approach. And I mentioned it earlier, we will take data from the onset of a project, okay, and literally pass that data through all the way downstream to the job site. And it's through a series of things as simple as Excel spreadsheets to C# plugins and Revit, Python scripts, lots of Dynamo. But it's a homegrown suite that ultimately allows us to greatly reduce the risk of manual information transfer from one environment to another. Again, then that's what I mean when I say bringing everything into the same ecosystem.
So just follow-up question. So what is your typical cycle from design conception to map drawings, say?
Yeah, well, so the niche market that we have landed in is in decentralized distributed building programs across large geographic areas. Repeated buildings that are built again and again and again and again. Think freestanding retail, convenience stores, fast food, anything where we can stand up a product, not a project. We stand up a product. Our building is a product that is repeatedly deployed with minor variations, structural optimization, site to site to site to site. So once we have stood up a product line and the infrastructure to support that product line, which is a process, it takes a long time, but we've done it successfully many times over. So once we get a project in the door, I can have a staff of 2 turn out a stamped set of structural drawings ready for permit application in 4 hours. And in a period of 2 days, I have it on the shop floor in production if that needs to be the case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have one question in the middle there.
Props to my team for that.
First of all, I'm just super impressed with seeing co-founder, vice president, head of research. So it's really incredible. And that's part of my question too, is just how did you get to where you are today? What did you do? What was that? Yeah. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, that's fun. I quit my job. I was so frustrated writing software, and I was like, darn it, I could do so much better. I could do so much better than working on this 20-year-old software code base. And I just left and tried to develop my own software. And it's kind of a stubbornness thinking that I could do better, that we could do better. And just looking at, like, for me, it's a lot about computation. Like I look at how far computers have come in 20 years, and then seeing that software has barely, inched forward, and understanding why that is, because basically it's refactoring old software is really, really, really hard. At one point, you just have to start and design from scratch with the knowledge and the understanding of how computers are working. As a result of that, I found a partnership with Vim, and then eventually they're just like, oh, no, this is not a partnership. You're coming with us. And so I joined forces and became the head of research there. So it's kind of serendipity, but like I said, just because I was determined for something better.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I wasn't the only one who sort of came from a non-architecture background. A lot of the other, Greg was in finance and Corey was in business management. My twin brother was an architectural engineer out of Penn State, so he's probably the closest. But when we all got together, I remember we were around the kitchen table and we had two projects. We had this waterfront park in Greenport, which we had won a commission for, and a fashion showroom in Soho. And, we didn't have an agreement in place. We said, I remember Greg saying, well, let's see how it goes. If we stop having fun, we'll break up. We actually didn't have a partner agreement until 15 years later, because we started realizing we had to be, adults here because we had staff. And then a year and a half ago, we created an ESOP. But one of the key things, I think, to how we grew the practice was listening to our talent in the office, and when they had things that they really thought were important, and not to sideline that. The other is because we didn't all come from this architecture background, we had all these other skill sets that we were able to bring into the practice. And, some of it was thrown right back in our face, because I remember, you're working with developers, you've sold out. But the conversations we have with really smart developers, it says, you want a successful project, it's about creating a great public realm, because you'll not only get the tourists, but you'll get everybody else in the neighborhood coming back to your place. And so we kept thinking about things that you normally wouldn't be thinking about. And some of the stuff that we're all talking about here is really infused the way that we sort of crafted Shop and then spun out other companies. One of them failed, Shop Construction failed. But we're looking good on assembly. And so the whole idea is it really is, and we also took our names off the door. It's just Shop, and that was another important thing. So it really is, at the end of the day, it's not one person. Of course, that's what the press wants to see. It's really about a collaborative of people coming together, and how that collaborative reaches out to the whole group of people that we've been all talking about.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I've learned, particularly through my time at Frog, that success is not achieved as in a silo. It is not succeeded at the individual, or it is not achieved at the individual level. It requires the right group of people always. So, I learned the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people, the right like-minded people, and the right, the properly diverse skill sets in those people, be them your bosses, your peers, your team members. Seek out the right people, and when you find them, good things really happen.
The funny quick answer is I was asked to draw manually just way too many parking garages. But the deeper answer really is that I grew up in a very conservative real estate development family. and I decided to go to the University of Texas at Austin School of Architecture, which is the exact opposite of a conservative development family. And for 5 years, I really struggled with why doesn't this group of people, like my professors, care about hitting the right metrics in a building or following realistic constraints. Like I would go do the crazy like shop building, and then I'd be like, okay, can I like make it what I want to make it now? Which would be like a more realistic, like 3-letter acronym firm design, or, you know. So I was just frustrated because my dinner table conversations were, we need to provide housing for America's people. Like, why doesn't the architecture community want to play ball? And then you go to ProPrac and there's, you know, grad students teaching us that know absolutely nothing about the real world, saying that the reason why we don't have housing is because real estate developers are greedy. That's not true at all. Like, yeah, they have to be greedy, because if they fail once, they're bankrupt. They lose their entire track record of making money. For me, it was just like seeing that disconnect and thinking like, okay, if I can move the needle a little bit by trying to get these two people to sort of play ball in the same sandbox, then maybe we can show a bit more empathy to one another.
Perfect. Please join me in thanking our panelists for a great discussion.